Testing. Well, good morning. Some people in the other section of the class are wondering about the first exam, and if you've been looking on your syllabus calendar, you know it's a week from Monday in class here. It doesn't take the whole class period to get it done, you know. You could call it more like a quiz if that makes you less nervous. Or, you know, 30 multiple choice questions. What was the other thing? Yeah, an essay, half page of writing. And you get the essay questions within a review outline. That'll be posted on Moodle by Monday. I might even get real energetic and post it on Sunday. Who knows? I work every day. It doesn't matter, you know. So, and you'll get this. Yes?
So the exam's not next week, but the week after that, or is it next week?
Wasn't it the 22nd?
Yeah.
Am I in the right place at the right time today? Okay. Well, it's whatever it says on the syllabus, and I think people are confirming that I was correct. I get wrong sometimes on dates and times, and okay, so yes, it is the 22nd. Yeah. Thank you. And so I usually get these review outlines out a week ahead of the exam, and what you'll receive there on the Moodle page is a Word document that breaks down each day's lecture into the most important points, you know, for you to study and to kind of go over. You can use the YouTube lectures to go over these facts. And then you also get a choice of 2 essay questions. And so I put both of them there. You can read them over and decide which one you'll want to answer in class. And they're just short. It's like a get right to the point kind of essay. You do have to write in complete sentences, so you know you can't make a little outline or something like that. No, it's really an essay, and essays are more than just a statement. They're an evaluation of the facts. You give your reasons for your conclusions. You don't just say, I think this, so there. You know, you got to explain things a bit, okay? So if anybody's unsure of how to write an essay answer, you can see me. Oh, you want?
This is the kind of stand drum.
Yes, you know, this is a good thing. I'm glad you thought about this, you know, because the multiple choice section, you use these little devices. You know, and I only do this because I teach giant lecture halls and I have so many people. But, you know, I can grade these on a machine, and I can also tell when the machine makes mistakes and things like that. Okay, yes?
You want a blue book for the...
No blue books, and thank you for asking that. If I see a blue book, I might scream or something, you know. You know, you just... I provide a little bit of paper for you. you'll get these paper test forms with all your multiple choice questions. And on the last page, it's a separate tear-off page. That's where you actually see your essay questions in case you want to change your mind and pick a different one of the two questions, or maybe you didn't even study and what were those questions again? They're going to be right there with a space underneath it to write your essay, plus extra room to write on the back of the page, you know, and when you turn in your scantrons and your test question forms, you separate the essay, you just pull it off, and we put those in a separate pile, and there you go. Okay, you'll see. It's nothing to it. And, you know, no.
Terrified?
Yeah, no need to be anxious or terrified. Okay, so more on that later. Oh, yes, and also next Friday I'll have a review session at the end of the day. I think around 5 o'clock, where both classes can show up somewhere and ask questions and all that. So I've been forgetting to get the room assignment for that. So I will do that today, get the room reserved. And the ideal is next Friday at 5 o'clock. If that's not available, I'll have to come up with another time. But you'll get that on the review outline Monday. It'll announce the room and time for the review session. So how's that? You guys feeling better now? You know, a little communication, it's a good thing, right? Okay, yeah. You know, some of you are new to this college routine, and let me tell you, you'll get professors that don't prepare you at all for exams, and that's, you know, just routine in a lot of cases. I'm a little different, you know. I remember still some of the pain I suffered, 30-something years ago as a student, and you know, I don't like to inflict the same kind of pain that I've suffered on other people, you know. So there you go. This is where we left off, and you may have noticed the recording. I posted this announcement on Moodle. Let me make sure I got both of those buttons pushed today. Okay. There's two on switches on the microphone. One's a power on and one's the mic on. I do not know why. Why don't you just have one switch that does the whole thing? And apparently on Wednesday, when I was setting up for my guest presenter there, I only flipped one of the switches when I set it on the table. So didn't get any audio. And so folks, whenever there's a technical difficulty in one class session, I will just put the other class's lecture on the page. Usually you don't get two in one day, unlike Wednesday. What we had in the afternoon class was one that wasn't my fault. The dang little projector up there wouldn't turn on. We went about almost 20 minutes before I had a tech guy come in and fix the projector in Uri Lecture Hall. And then he showed me a secret to how to fix it myself the next time that ever happens. And so we got a short lecture that day, about 30 minutes, and that's the one on your Moodle. So I'm going to just start from this point we left off. This is actually one of my favorite lectures, so I'm going to have a good time with this and pay attention, because this is not only the foundation besides spirituality, this is how the spirituality is lived out. You know, it also has a lot of relevance to our current circumstances in the world today, and possible solutions and ways of seeing the world. So a perspective shared by people all over the world at one time for, as you see, most of our history. Before I go to the next text slides, just a little comment here and questions to raise. So if you see that, this idea of aggressive, overpopulated societies, exploiting all your resources, and then relying on the resources of neighbors or distant neighbors, regional neighbors, and turning to warfare, conquest, and all that. If you see that doesn't come in to fairly recent in this vast span of human history, the question then is, what were people doing all the rest of that time? And how are they living? And there are certain conclusions that Western civilization and industrial capitalist society came to in the late 19th century, the justifiers of colonialism and empire building. It basically said, well, for all the rest of that history, which we'll call prehistory, because they didn't write things down, people were basically stupid. That's what they're saying, and that they didn't know it was in their best interest to be aggressive and consume as much resources as they could, and because they weren't good capitalists, they must have been stupid. Okay, that's one way of looking at it, okay? That's the prevailing opinion about so-called prehistoric people, but I just call them the first peoples and the harmonious peoples, as we'll see. And here's another one to answer questions about how these people claim they're stupid, like, why didn't they invent the wheel? This is a great one, Think about it. What are the benefits of the wheel? You can get places faster. You can carry more stuff faster and easier than just using pack animals and walking or riding horses. And that affects your ability to have a competitive edge in a market economy, right? And that's an unquestioned goal within our normal society under our system. What about another way of looking at that? We're not in a hurry. We don't have a whole bunch of stuff to haul around everywhere we go. The earth is our storehouse. We don't need money. We're content. We like the way we live. Nobody's in a hurry. And we're living in natural time, which is something I'm going to get to and explain a little more. Natural cycles, seasons, and in a world of abundant natural resources too. That's one of the other keys, the sustainable world. And so this also answers a related question. I was listening to, in my commute back to the farm, I usually listen to NPR, and the guy on the news, what is he? Oh yeah, some NASA space guy was saying, I know there's life on other planets, and if you just do the statistical odds, look at our solar system, we got 9 planets, depending on how you look at Pluto, and Earth is definitely still habitable, but Mars, they're thinking, was at one time. What happened to Mars, Something like what we're doing now. But anyway, and that's just 9 planets, 1 solar system. And the guy did all this math. He said, the odds are that 1 in 1,000 of the planets in the billions of solar systems, just in our galaxy, probably has life on it. So the question, a lot of us, I used to be kind of a sci-fi buff when I was a kid. Everybody was in the 60s, Is we thought we were going to have our own personal rocket ships like the Jetsons or on the cartoons and all that. And so everybody's wondering, well, how come they don't come here in their spaceships and all that? Are they stupid? Because they're not making spaceships and leaving their beautiful homes and going out into this vast unknown and risking their lives for who knows what? Or are these people who take care of their worlds, live sustainably, love their worlds, and are content? No need to go to those stars in the sky. We love them the way where they are, and we love being where we are. You know, much to say on this topic, but I like introducing questions about the usual unquestioned, what's normally goes unconsidered in our society. And I think by design, too, not just by accident, that there are certain powers that want you to feel like our system, it's the only way to go. It's the best in the world. Okay. So I call this applied spirituality, as you see here. And as I said when we talked about the first people receiving their instructions, they were taught by the spirits how to live in the world, and this beauty all around us was interpreted to them, and their role within it, and how do you keep the world alive. And so your economic life, what is it? You know, it's not just the accumulation of money and stuff that we've been learned of, but the economics, the root of economics is how do you engage with the material world to meet your needs, not meet your endless consumption desires, but what you really need and need to be happy, not just survive, to be happy. Okay. And so that's where these spiritual economics concepts begin with. You know, it's another question that you begin an economic society with is, how do we show our thanks for this beautiful world that's been given to us to participate in, you know? And not how do we just plunder everything and destroy it. So key concepts here then. I mentioned this word once, subsistence. Subsistence is often presented with some associated loaded terminology like mere, meager. These are the phrases that the early anthropologists used in the 19th century when anthropology was basically a young field of study and had a function within the academic system of justifying colonialism and empire building. And so they constantly demeaned indigenous people and their lifeways around the world and tried to make it look like the most miserable type of life you could ever want to live, right? Which would justify going to their islands or nations and saying, hey, we've got a better way for you to submit to us, you know. And that's a long story short view of history, but we'll look at this history of colonialism later. So subsistence, if you take away those adjectives that are meant to demean tribal people and just looked at subsistence alone, all it is how do you sustain your life, you know, how do you interact with the natural resources and all the things associated with that kind of activity is your subsistence. And then the next one is something called subsistence economics, which is systems built on how you relate to the world. How does a whole society, rather than one individual, relate to the natural world? So you develop a system, and it doesn't need money. It doesn't rely on trade, although people traded long before there was money or currencies in the world. And so living directly from the natural resource space without the need for money, there's a new phrase for this now because it's becoming a more popular concept that people are considering, and they call it the resource-based economy. Now you could say all economies are resource-based, but resource exclusive of artificial wealth, artificial currencies. And so you could look that up on the internet. And then a word I use very often, and I find now the rest of society is using this word much more often than we did 20 or 30 years ago. And so you even have courses now taught in colleges on sustainability. Of course, this is an integral part of Indigenous lifeways sustainability. It's the tradition. That's what people were doing for the first 97.5% of our existence, living sustainably, keeping the balance, keeping the world alive. And here's a definition, and you may come across, better definitions than this someday, but we'll work with this and build on it. Taking from the earth only what each ecosystem can afford to give, and allowing or helping those sources to be replenished. And you may have heard before somebody say, the Indians only took what they need. That's a partial truth, They didn't only measure what can we harvest from the earth today based on a sense of need, because human sense of need can get a little off kilter sometimes. You can imagine needs that aren't really needs. They just kind of be a lot of fun to have, this or that, You can imagine all kinds of things and call them needs. But what we're talking about is the needs of people, including those around them. So they would consider the needs of all of the beings that they lived with, lived around them, as mutual needs, symbiotic needs. Remember that word, symbiotic? Interconnected needs. So, for example, how does this play out? I like to talk about huckleberries because they're one of my favorite natural foods around here. Don't usually miss a huckleberry season. And when the people would go out to harvest it, when that fruit was ready to give itself to you in season, they wouldn't just clean off every bush they'd come to and say, this is mine. But they realized not only are there other people, other villages, other tribes that go through this region and partake of this, but the little chipmunks, the birds, the bears, all of these beings that we share this world with that contribute to each other love those huckleberries. And so you'd go to a bush and you'd give thanks, you'd take some of them, leave the rest on that bush, move a little ways over and do that over and over again until you feel content that you have what you need. And you would do it usually in groups and with a lot of happiness and celebration. There are songs that people would sing when they would gather the natural resources. There are still some people who know some of these songs. And they're kind of like prayer, Thanksgiving songs and happy songs. And that was the way, and there wasn't this anxiety that you see today that this might be our last chance to get these huckleberries. Let's just get as many as we can. But there is this sense from past experience and the stories of the elders and all of that, that we would come back to these places every year, and the berries, if we were taking good care of them, would still be there. They'd be there every season. They were our friends. You know, they're reliable, sometimes more reliable than humans. And that's the sense that people had about everything, and it eliminates financial or economic anxiety. You know, that your relationship to the world is your source of life, or your bank, let's say, or something like that. You know, as long as the earth is doing good, you're doing good. As long as your homeland is good, you're doing good. So that kind of belief then lends itself very well to sustainability. You actually depend on harmony, balance, and the world continuing, rather than an artificial economy that can make you independent of whatever the natural world. The little people live in your square box there. Okay, okay. And so, in contrast, I like to teach in contrast because, you know, for most of everybody here, this is the only world you know, right? So you have to kind of measure and compare these other worlds I'm talking about to what you know. But see this as a possible route to how everything changed 6,000 years ago. Once you have this stuff called currency, you become able to alienate yourself from the natural world by accumulating this stuff, so that whatever the earth is doing, say you had a temporary drought or something, you know, you can insulate yourself and be able to take resources from somewhere else rather than your homeland. And as time goes on under a system like that, you become more and more alienated from the source of all wealth and life. It becomes kind of semi-relevant or even almost irrelevant, as long as there's somewhere on the planet you can go and exploit. And then what if the planet's starting to look a little bit like Mars? Oh, as this guy on the radio saying, well, we should go to Mars and try to rebuild it. Why not start here? I don't know what this guy is, you know, they pay him a lot of money to work at NASA, I guess. And you know, all these planets out there have got resources that take a lot of fossil fuels to get there. Or maybe you'll come up with solar spaceships. I don't know. But how about taking care of what we got? That's the old way of doing things that seem to work for most of our existence. So the original economic system worldwide began with plenty, not scarcity. The reason I say this is because in economics 101 classes, or at least they used to, you know, and way back in the 90s, I was talking to an old, just about to retire economics professor from Nevada, and he was at a conference and giving a little presentation on basic economics, and he says, you know, the usual spiel. Economic systems began with scarcity, and then they organized to avoid scarcity, and so on and so forth. And I told him, you know, in our tribal traditions, you know, before all these things changed, our stories say we began in a world of plenty, and our economic system was taking care of the plenty. And to this man's credit, you know, he was like 70-something years old, been teaching Economics 101 at the college level, who knows how many years. He was still a lifelong learner. And he was able to say, every time I saw him the rest of that conference, world of plenty. You know, I never thought about that. And then he wanted to talk a little bit about it. But see, you can remain oblivious to everything if nobody ever introduces it to you. You know, you can only become familiar with what is given to you or what might occur to you through circumstances, and otherwise nobody gets a new idea, nobody changes it. They just take whatever was normal to them. And so it began in a world of plenty, resources considered gifts, not random, we already went over that. Okay. And then the question, then where does everything go wrong? How does it go wrong? And overpopulation has a lot to do with it, but it doesn't mean total world overpopulation necessary, like some people say we're getting to today or are already there. But just locally, whatever the ecosystem can't handle, the holding capacity or carrying capacity of a particular ecosystem. They have their limits on how many humans can live here, how many deer, how many mice, squirrels, rats. Everything has its point of balance and point of overpopulation. And a biodiverse system will usually keep everything in check. And when you wipe out species, throw things off balance, then you'll get a lot of overpopulation of certain species, and the ecosystem suffers. So everybody understood this at some level in tribal societies, that all the beings are needed. They keep each other in check, keep a balance, and none of them, including the humans, should overpopulate our home. And so when you had overpopulation, you know, say a plague of a certain species eating too much or too many humans, things were run off balance. And so what the humans would do, similar to what some other species would do, is move. You would have a long time of prayer and council and ceremony, and then there would be a dividing of the tribe. This has happened over and over again throughout the history of tribes everywhere. Became too large for the ecosystem. The tribe splits and parts of them moves, you know, a little ways away, traveling distance, where so you can still visit each other and all of that away. You know, another valley, over another mountain range. And that would be the way to keep systems in check. There are also ways of keeping your population low, natural birth control methods and natural ways of living and spacing out your kids and not having too many too close together and all that. There's a lot of ways about that. So overpopulation has been the prime reason for the rise and fall of empires. And I'm including indigenous American empires, a couple of those. The mega societies that European civilization admired so much. Well, they were really out of balance societies. But there's this tendency among mega society citizens to idealize being big, being overly large. And when they see another society like that, they say, oh, look at that, they're advanced. And that advanced term is a arbitrary assignment. It's relevant to, relative to whatever you define it as, you know. And so this is an unstable occurrence in human history, the rise and fall of empires. It's always led to a lot of suffering, a lot of warfare, and destabilization of not only human societies, but ecosystems, populations of all kinds of beings, deforestation, all of that occurs when you have these mega societies outside of balance. So, how are we doing? That looks pretty good. I'm about right where I thought I'd be. Shouldn't tell myself that, though, because the next thing that happens is I tell an extra story, fall behind, you know how it goes. Yeah, okay. So let me just say, before we go to the next slide then, Any questions so far on any of this stuff? Because this is a different perspective, isn't it? I mean, it's real different. Some people might say, it's real out there. That's weird. You're saying everything's reverse of how I always thought it should be. Yes, Tom, go ahead.
So what I'm understanding, the change from how things were back then to how they are now is mostly due to money, greed for money?
I think that the overpopulation comes before money and creates a dependency on trade. And thanks for asking that, because it's a good segue to the next slide. How do you still have trade without getting out of balance? And what sort of trade did indigenous people traditionally have and still remained in sustainable balance with everything? And traded without the use of money or currency. So let's take a look at that. What about trade? So there are two primary reasons why societies engaged in trade before unsustainability came in and dependence on trade came in later. So before that, most of our human existence, people traded for these two reasons. And the first one is back to relationship and reciprocity, keeping the world alive, all of those things. You and your neighbors both have belief systems that pretty much say you belong here and you're here to take care of this place, and they're over there taking care of their place. And you realize that it's up to you guys to keep this steady state of existence and being in place, and it would be beneficial to everybody. The other thing is people realize that if you destroy your own homeland, there's going to be a spillover effect to neighboring homelands. All the things are connected. Remember I said even animals migrate when the world's thrown off balance. And where are they going to go? They're going to go to your neighbor's homeland and throw that off balance. So it was in the interest of all tribal societies that other tribes and other villages within your tribe maintain this same respectful, interactive relationship with the earth, you know. So keeping the world alive wasn't just for you and your local world. It was part of what every species and every human group everywhere was supposed to be doing. That's the traditional way of seeing it. So the other thing about this is that along with this intertribal trade or trading with neighbors, there's a lot of intermarriage between tribes. That goes way back. You know, before Europeans and Africans came to this continent, tribes intermarried, you know, and then later these other folks come and that practice of intermarriage still continued. One of the reasons you would have intermarriage between tribes, and very often people at leadership positions, their families and their kids would intermarry, is that you'd be less likely to disrespect them or go to war against them if you had relatives there. And you would care for them more and make sure they are okay too. And so that would happen at these intertribal trades. All kinds of good relationships, the ball games I was talking about, would often happen at these trade gatherings. And they'd be a few times a year, you know, it wasn't, you know, an everyday thing. Trade wasn't, you know, like today shopping. That can be an everyday thing for people. Got to go do some trading right now. I'm out of milk, or I'm out of this, you know. We ran out of lettuce. Yeah, things like that, you know, but they had their food stored from the previous season. So it wasn't out of necessity It was out of a need to keep this harmony and balance. And then the other reason is to kind of brighten up your life. It's a new definition of the word luxury, to acquire luxury items, coming from the Latin root lux, or lux means light or to brighten up. And to have things that people in other ecosystems a little ways away from you have more of an abundance of than you do, and then likewise you have stuff aplenty that they might not have, and you trade and exchange, and you're not measuring, you know, numbers of, I gave you this many beaver hides, so you got to give me this many seashells and all that. Let me just, I jumped ahead of myself a little. So, for example, coastal peoples have access to a lot of shellfish and seafood and just an abundance of that at that time. And a lot of the jewelry, and I'm not wearing my wampum today, but you know, the quahog clam shells in Massachusetts coastal societies. You know, that was a popular item for people further up inland, you know, say all the way up to northwestern Massachusetts and upstate New York. So the people on the borders and further out there. And so they, up there, would have an abundance of fur-bearing animals and a lot of hides, and they'd bring those to a point in between where they lived and the coastal peoples, or they would go to each other's places and share their respective abundance with each other. And in traditional trade, and this is what I was just getting to, it's not measuring now, you got to give me this much stuff because I gave you that. In the old teachings about generosity and humility and all that, there is this kind of contest going on of trying to outgive each other because of the honor associated with being a generous person. That was a highly held value. And people, you know, kind of had a currency in honor and respect and all that. And that was what you were seeking, not accumulating this false symbol of wealth, you know, made by human hands, little coins and pieces of paper and all of that. And so this was a whole different value system, right? And so you brightened up your life having these cool things that these other people had or knew how to make. You know, there was a time, just checking, because, you know, whenever I say, there was a time when, that could go way out of control, couldn't it? But let me just kind of, it's a preview of our colonial era history. And this is proof, and among many other things, that wampum beads, like the kind I was wearing and other kinds of wampum, were never money. You know, you heard maybe somewhere, anybody hear somebody say, wampum was the Indians' money? Totally false. Just another Eurocentric assumption, you know, or non-native assumption, you know, because they saw people giving the shell beads and the necklaces to each other and all of that, and capitalists would normally assume, well, that must be their currency. Everybody's got to have a currency, right? And so when first the Dutch in New Netherlands and then the English in Connecticut and Massachusetts had a shortage of their own currency about late 1630s, not too long after arrival. And they saw the natives valued these wampum beads. They didn't understand it and all the symbolic meaning of necklaces and how they sealed alliances between people and all that. They didn't understand that. They just thought it was money. So they tried to make a currency out of the wampum beads. And now, just a long story short here, they weren't very good at it. You know, making beads out of seashells is very difficult, tedious process, and you break a lot of shells trying to learn how to do it right. And so they recognize, just like the inland tribes recognize, that the coastal people really have a skill for this, making these seashell beads. And so then they forced a lot of Indians to make these beads for them. But that's another story we're going to get to later. But the old-timers, that before the Europeans arrived, the people in the inland realized that this skill at making wampum beads is a special skill that the coastal people have. And they had a special skill of making, say, blankets out of hides that, maybe the other people have some of that skill too, but you could see how that there were specialists at different skills in different societies, even while everybody was self-sufficient and knew how to do stuff for themselves. They knew that these people were really good at that. We do it okay, but they're like the experts. And so that's another reason for trade. You want to get the finest stuff sometimes. Not obsessed with it, not like you need to have, the fanciest looking this or that. It just was kind of fun. And everybody realized from the stories, beware, don't get too attached to these trade items, and don't let it throw you off balance. Be thankful, remain content, and remain responsible for keeping your world alive and doing what you've been given to do. So all of that was a part of Indigenous economics. I'm going to see if I can, I really needed to wrap this up today, but I'll do my best. That's all I can do. So luxury, variety, the spice of life, all of these descriptions of the joy of trading when you're not really having to, but it's a fun thing to do now and then. It's very different than dependency on trade. And last line on this slide, nothing to sell, nothing to buy, no reason to lie. Well, that's kind of an exaggeration, but it takes away a lot of the reasons that people do lie. In a competitive currency-based economy, there's a lot of misrepresentation of value because you're pursuing currency, you're not pursuing keeping the earth alive, and so people have to be talked into valuing things that they don't really need. Just something to think about. That's just kind of a silly little joke there almost. This isn't going to be on the exam, right? Nothing to sell, nothing to buy, no reason to lie. Just a funny little saying, okay? I can delete it if you want me to. I don't care. So I'm going to the last, I'm going to skip through this item pretty quick here. But it's just an example of keeping the world alive, and that has come into popular use beginning with the National Forest Service in the 1960s, and now all of the government land management agencies do this on a regular basis. So do private industries, logging companies, people that manage forests, all kinds. Have seen the value of controlled burns. Because it wasn't practiced for a long time after Native people were put on reservations, we came to a point in many areas where you couldn't do it anymore. There was too much fuel built up in the forest, like the Yellowstone fire of 1988, I believe it was because these practices of controlled burns had been forbidden by government agents, limiting what Native people could do. But let me just say that it was, let me see how fast I can get through this. And basically once or twice a year, depending on your tribe and your ecosystem and what your tradition was. The horticultural tribes did a controlled burn to prepare new planting areas, and then another one to prevent overgrowth in the woods and make a nice undergrowth for deer that kind of enhances your hunting too, gives them a good nutrient. That the fresh growth that comes up, whether it's grass, weeds, what people call weeds, other crops and other plants, has a high nutrient value and attracts your ungulate or your hoofed animals. They love that stuff, and especially in the spring when the females are carrying their young, it assures that you're going to have healthy offspring. And so this was a way of reciprocating the deer people, the elk people, all the other species, and then facilitating a higher probability that you would get meat when you hunt them too. That was one, and there's many other interactions because all of the different animals benefited from having this prevention of excessive buildup of wood. I'm out of time. My gosh, how did that happen? Well, we'll wrap it up real quick on Wednesday. Next week we'll look at government and art, and those will be our last two subjects before the exam. Okay, so have a good long weekend. You know you don't have to be here Monday, right? Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm exhausted.